My peoples, welcome to a bonus episode of Rants and Randomness. I've decided to do an Ask Luvvie episode where I answer some questions y'all have dropped in my inbox. And I'm a fan of transparency, and I'm a fan of people of Love Nation. You know I love y'all. And I'm excited to further connect with folks and help demystify stuff. So let's jump into it. So my first question is from Just Dells on Instagram. She said, how did you know that writing was your calling? Did you have a mentor? Here's the thing. I didn't know writing was my calling. I actually fought the idea that I was a writer tooth and nails for years. I was supposed to be a doctor. That's what I wanted to be when I started college. Actually, since I've been young, I wanted to be a doctor. I started college with my degree, with my major in psych pre-med, and then I took chemistry. Got this strong D, first of my academic career, and I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and drop this doctor dream. It ain't gonna work. I don't even like hospitals. But I started my blog in 2003 because I was peer pressured into doing it. And essentially, this thing that was like a peer pressure thing became something that I loved doing, and I just kept on doing it. So when I graduated from college in 2006, I deleted that blog and started what is now awesomelyluvvie.com. But I kept on writing along the way, even though I had a full-time job doing marketing. I kept on writing even when I was like, this is not bringing me money. But something always compelled me to keep on writing. Even when I wanted to quit, I'd get a note from somebody who was like, the reason why I wasn't crying when I was sitting in the waiting room as my mom got chemotherapy was because I was reading your blog. Writing was something that just felt right for me to do, even though I didn't call myself a writer because I didn't think writing was a tangible career for me because I didn't see other writers like me. I was like, oh, I'm not J.K. Rowling or Toni Morrison. I'm just a girl who gives her opinions on the world. I'm not a writer. How dare I call myself a writer? But I think I was doing myself that disservice because I didn't see what it could look like to be my version of a writer. I didn't see that example. So I fought it. But I think it was finally 2012 when I finally was like, yo, you're a writer. Because at that point, I'd been writing for 9 years. I had this gift that I didn't realize was a gift. I thought everybody could do what I was doing. But I think finally I had a moment where I was like, no, you have this thing that a lot of people don't have. You are a writer. You've been doing this thing for 9 years. How dare you not admit that you're a writer just because it doesn't look like everybody else's writing? It was one of those moments where I had to stop denying that I was this. So, yeah, it wasn't like a light bulb moment where I was like, this is my calling. I think I had to sit back and look over the years and be like, there's this thing that I'm really good at. There's this thing that touches people, and you get the feedback all the time that you connect with people with your words. You've been doing this thing longer than anything else you've been doing. Yeah, this is your right. This is your purpose. And I think about the fact that when I got laid off my last full-time job in 2010, I was never really able to get another full-time job. I'd apply for other marketing jobs. I was qualified, but it was kind of like the universe pushing me to take the leap of faith I wasn't going to take myself. And again, when you think back to all of that, I finally had to be like, yeah, man, this is what you're supposed to be doing. I didn't have a writing mentor, but I look at people who I admire from afar as like mentors in my head because I study what they're up to. I learn the lessons they share. You can have mentors who don't even realize they're your mentors. So I had those. And I just kind of paid attention to myself. I used my own voice. I was my own biggest mentor because I wasn't looking at other people to see exactly what they were doing to try to replicate it. I was just kind of writing in the way that was most true to me and writing in a way that didn't attempt to replicate somebody else's voice. So in that way, I was my own biggest mentor. But in blogging, I had friends who were also bloggers who were in different industries. But yeah, mentors are important, learning from them. But ultimately, I think my writing journey and my decision to know it was my calling took longer than it should have because I'm stubborn. But it probably was what helped my journey just as much because it meant that I did it in the way that was most real to me. I did it without pretense, and I did it without expectation, which probably made me a better writer since I was able to hone it in the way that was actually like, I wasn't thinking about who's reading it. What is my strategy? What's going to come from this? I was just doing it from the love. And I think that definitely was a blessing. Copper Paper on Instagram asked, how do you stay motivated when you feel like the days get predictable or mundane? You know what's funny? I actually don't have days that get mundane or predictable. And I think there's some power in some mundane. We're always expecting excitement and the extraordinary. But I think there's something to be said by sitting in the mundane and in the ordinary. A lot of my days look different. Every week of my life looks different. It has since I dropped my book. So certain weeks I might be on the road because I have a couple of speaking engagements where I'm keynoting. Other weeks I might be doing a photo shoot. The week after that I might be doing some press. And then the week after that, hopefully I'm sitting down and actually creating work. I try to diversify my days. I try to diversify my work just because that's who I've been since the beginning. For example, my blog has never been a blog where I cover just one topic. I've always diversified my content. So even when I couldn't be bored because one day I might be writing about whether, what's the best flavor of Starburst? Pink is the one. This is not up for debate. Yellow is the one you give the person you don't like. And the day after that, I might be writing a piece on the stages of what happens when there's injustice against Black people. I've made sure my career hasn't gotten boring or predictable to me because I've made sure I didn't necessarily put myself in a box. I think people get bored when they put themselves in the box, where it's just like, all I talk about is this one topic. Well, what happens when you don't feel like talking about that one topic today? Then you have to do what? Force yourself to talk about it or do nothing? So there's value in diversifying your work in some way, and then that diversifies your days. So for me, I'm also in multiple industries at once. I'm in pop culture and comedy and media. I'm in technology and business, and then I'm also in activism and social justice. So again, I dabble in different things all at once. I'm a multi-hyphenate. When people ask what I do, I say I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcast host, I'm a professional troublemaker, I'm an activist. So again, it's hard for me to feel like my days are predictable. So I always want to encourage people, you do not have to force yourself to pick a box. You can be in 4 different boxes at once, or you can be in no boxes. It's up to you to do that. So I encourage people to kind of stretch themselves and find ways to make their work really interesting, even when it's the same work over and over again. But try not to do the same work over and over again. Find a side hustle. Do something else. Someone called Love Coach Danny Spikes asked the question, as an up-and-coming coach, I feel like everyone had already made it and that it's pointless in trying to drive a message in a crowded market. How do you find your voice and make it heard in a seemingly overcrowded market? That's a great question. Here's the thing. There's 173, 200 million blogs that exist in the world. The market is oversaturated in that way, right? But the thing is, there's 15,000 water companies, but there are new bottled water companies that pop up every day. I think it's less about the market and more about what you're bringing to it that makes it different. I'm not the only person who has a pop culture blog or humor blog. I'm not the only person who does marketing work and social media work. But I think what I bring to the table is how I approach it in my voice. And I think that's what you have to figure out. What is your approach? What are you adding to the conversation? Everyone has something to add to the conversation. And what people will want from you that they can't get anywhere else is your perspective, your specific voice. If you are compelled to do something, you love something, it is something you're good at, worry less about how saturated the market is and worry more about how excellent your work will be that you're offering people. I don't think I'm the only person who does what I do, but I think I'm the only person who does what I do in the way that I do it. Your value is that you are who you are, right? It's the thing that nobody else can replicate, which is like purely you. So you have to kind of dig deep, figure out what your voice is. Now, I always tell people that it's less about finding your voice. You already have it. Your voice is not lost. You're not playing a hide and go seek game with your voice. It's already there. I think the problem is we don't trust ourselves enough to be authentically ourselves. So then we're like, I got to go find my voice. No. What is it that you think when somebody asks you a question? How are you approaching that in your own head? Why don't you use that same thing in real life? Like I write like I speak. I give information like I'm thinking about it. So essentially, what people are receiving is how I process stuff. So when people are like, oh my God, how did you find your voice? I'm like, I just wrote in a way that I was thinking. It's that simple. Don't complicate matters by like, I have to go look for my voice. No, your voice is there. So how you approach coaching, it's just who you are, how people connect to you, how you give your ideas, how people are able to understand what you're saying to them is what will make you stand out. So yeah, don't worry about the saturated market. Because again, you will never be the only person doing whatever you're doing. Okay, you won't be the first coach. You won't be the 55th coach. You are a coach, right? And so just do the work in the way that you know how. Jordan Elizabeth 82 asked the question, do you ever deal with imposter syndrome? I've been at my job and grown so much in my career for 8 years. I'd like to work for myself, but feel like no one is going to pay me for it. Like I'm just faking it every day and really have no idea what I'm doing. We all deal with imposter syndrome. I talked about it with one of my guests, Francesca, recently. Imposter syndrome is being in rooms and thinking we don't belong there, or thinking our work doesn't have the value for us to charge for it, or thinking people won't pay for our work. And it's something that people will always struggle with, right? But you kind of have to push yourself past it on a very logical level. Imposter syndrome serves one good purpose. It means we're constantly striving to be better than we currently are. That's a good thing. But the thing imposter syndrome can also do is that it stops us from doing the work that we're supposed to be doing because we think the work is not good enough. And in those cases, we're doing ourselves and the world a disservice. Whatever it is that you want to do, you have to think like, all right, I love doing this thing. I need to put it out in the world. Hopefully people will pay for it because I understand that this thing is good. That is your only job, right? Don't let the imposter syndrome, even if you still have it, even if you're like, this is not good, still put it out and see what happens. And also trust when people tell you that it's good, because the feedback that you get about it, a lot of times we get feedback where people are like, oh my God, this work is amazing. And you're like, really? No, I thought it sucked. No, it sucked. When somebody tells you the work is amazing, take that and say, you know what? All right, I'll accept that. That means I can keep going. Trust people when they say the work is good. Trust people when they say, you know what, I will pay for that. Spend less time questioning that, because I don't think it does you any favors to continue to question whether your work is worth paying for. I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and she has a stationery business. And she was like, every time she does something that a client pays for or a client wants to pay for, she says she has a hard time sending them the invoice because she's like, I don't think that was really good. But she's giving them this product. And then she has a hard time sending them the invoice for them to pay for it because she's like, was that worth money? And here I am holding something of hers that I actually had her do for me, like a wooden slice that had a custom font on it. And it was so good. And I was like, yo, this thing is badass. This is amazing. And she's like, really? I'm like, look, I'm not blowing smoke. This is really good. You absolutely have to unapologetically charge people for this, actually increase your pricing because it's so good. And she has such a hard time accepting it. And it's always the people who are really good at their craft who have a hard time accepting how good it is because they always want to be better. So my advice for you is that you take this imposter syndrome, use it to the best of your ability by like actually having it push you to constantly get better, but absolutely drop your work, okay? In spite of however you're feeling, just drop it. Just do it like Nike, and receive the feedback in a very pure way. Accept when people tell you it's good, and please charge for it, because goes even beyond you when you don't charge for it. I think it does everybody a disservice when artists or people or creatives or women don't charge for our work because it perpetuates the idea that our work is not worth charging for. So do it for the culture, do it for yourself, and don't let imposter syndrome be what stops you from creating the work that you're compelled to create. Hey, it's BK writes me and says, "Hey, Luvvie, I'm wondering about your struggles to get a book deal. I wrote a fictional book 3 years ago and have been trying to get a book deal for about a year. I feel really defeated. I've written for large publications and smaller ones. I've started my own blog, networked the best I can. The reality is I may not have something worth publishing, but every agent I've spoken to says just the opposite. I really see huge things for this book. The no's have felt so personal recently, and I'm worried I've wasted 3 years creating and pitching a dud. What's your advice for keeping the faith?" So me getting my book deal was apparently an outlier. I got my book deal a month after I dropped my proposal. But it was like, I feel like I wrote my deal at a time when I was ready. But here's the thing about all the no's. The no's will come, right? It's hard not to take it personal because this work that you did feels personal to you. But I always think about, like, when I hear stories of all these major books and these huge TV shows and how many no's they got. I think J.K. Rowling got something like 12 no's, like 12 publishers turned down the Harry Potter series. 12. And that book is now like the best-selling book in the world. It's turned her into a billionaire. Everybody can't be J.K. Rowling, I understand that. But if this thing that you've written is something you are really proud of, I don't think you've wasted 3 years of your life. I really don't think there is a waste of time unless whatever you've done served you zero, you learned zero lessons, and you utterly regret it, which I hope you don't. If you created it, then you shouldn't regret it. It should exist in the world. Getting a book deal is tough. It's an insulated industry. You have to get a book agent first, and then your book agent will then be the advocate that takes it to publishers. But if you're having such a hard time getting a book deal, I want to encourage you to self-publish. That's an option. The good thing is books and creative stuff and products have been democratized. You don't need a gatekeeper. If your book cannot get a publisher, it should not just sit and never be seen by the world. You can self-publish, which means you essentially fund the book being printed and then you do all of the marketing yourself. There's a lot of power in self-publishing. Like, had I not gotten my book deal after trying multiple times for a couple of years, I would have absolutely self-published. There's nothing wrong with it. It's an option that exists for you. It doesn't make your book any less valuable or your content any less valuable. You should consider self-publishing. Because if you're waiting for the gatekeepers to give you permission to drop this work that you think is important, then you're essentially waiting for validation from heads that actually aren't, they're not leaning towards validating us, especially Black women. Publishing is overwhelmingly white, too. That's another thing. So there are a lot of books that get rejected because the white gaze doesn't understand this Black book that you wrote, or your voice as a Black woman, or whatever it is that you actually want to pass along to the world from this book. I highly recommend that if agents are telling you this is really good, if a couple of editors have read your book, like you can actually have a freelance editor read your book, or if a couple of your friends who you love and you trust their judgment are like, this book is amazing, consider self-publishing, because you no longer need permission for your book to be out in the world. You can use social media to pub. There's a bunch of like hybrid houses where if you want to self-publish, they'll help you with the whole process. I mean, I'm not expecting you to sit in your house printing your books yourself. No. Self-publishing means you hire a printer. They will do all that work for you. And I mean, people GoFundMe their books all the time where they like, I want to make sure my book is out in the world and I need funding to help make it happen. So look to that, because these no's that you're getting, they might feel personal, but it might not even be about you. It's not necessarily about you. So you got to do what you got to do to get your work out in the world, and don't wait for permission always. So that is my advice. Girls, self-publish. But yeah, so I love answering you guys' questions. If you have any questions you want me to answer on a future episode of Rants and Randomness, feel free to email luvierants@gmail.com. That's LUVVIERANTS@gmail.com. Send your questions there, and I might be answering it on a future episode. And as always, follow me on social media at Luvvie, LUVVIE. Rate, subscribe to this podcast, and I will see you on the next episode.